what would you like to hear in this budget that suggests to you that many of these commitments are being taken seriously? And then I'll come to the medium-term measures, Professor Debash, on what need to be done from law, policy, expenditure point of view.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little bit of a catch-22. You want to see serious signs in the budget, but at the same time, you don't want to see precipitous actions that lock you in. So, for example, I would be wary of unthought through electric vehicle adoption targets.
Okay.
We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We don't want to have targets for adoption and subsidies for electric vehicles without thinking through what it means for the public transport system as a whole, as I said. So I would rather see in this budget more assessment, so some small amounts of money and a plan put aside to actually look at the kinds of fiscal transitions that we've talked about. What does it actually mean to transition to a low carbon economy, and what does that mean for India's revenue structure? Given the role of fuel taxes, and what does it mean for shifts in the expenditure pattern? What does it mean for some of the federalism issues around state financing? How do we support states to experiment with low carbon futures? How do we encourage cities to experiment with low carbon urbanization? So I think supporting pilot projects in states and in cities, including second-tier cities, for that low carbon transition is going to be important, because the center doesn't have all the ideas and all the answers. It has to be experimentation by the states. So I think a judicious mix of more understanding of the structural changes and some pilots would actually be preferable to having big, bold proclamations that are not fully thought through as yet.
Okay, and if I can follow up with one more thing, one point that you made about how is India moving towards a hydrogen economy. We've now seen in the last 3 or 4 months, large corporations announce big plans, towards that. Do you expect that, or do you think there should be any provision in the budget that recognizes this shift?
Well, once again, it comes back, I'm afraid, to the bigger question, right?
Okay.
Big strategic changes in our economy need to be, at minimum, informed by analysis and some modeling work and some sense of what the options are. So a lot of things point to an important role for hydrogen in the future. But I think we have to think through the sequencing of when hydrogen fuels come on tap, what they will displace, what we do with the other fuel sources that we have. And I'm not convinced that we as yet have that analytical base. So I would rather see a process put in place and a rollout a year from now, once we understand a little bit better what a hydrogen future looks like. I am afraid a little bit that we see too many big picture, high public relations value announcements, but that often are not thought through in terms of their secondary effects and their ripple effects to the economy. So I would rather see clear indications of a direction of travel, and then a process that's put in place that will allow to a more sustained action maybe a year from now.
All right. Professor Somanathan, I was reading, I think, a brief paper, I'm not sure it's a paper, but a contribution that you'd written, No Brainers in India, in which it suggested 3 things. Raise tax on coal, mandate 100% electrification of 2- and 3-wheelers, and promote electric cooking, all of this towards cutting black carbon emissions. Now, are these, would you identify these as short-term goals? So would you expect to see, let's say the finance minister talk about some of these in the budget for you to believe that, yes, we're making the right steps towards achieving the broader commitments at COP26?
Yes, actually, those 3 were supposed to be kind of low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
The easiest part of the transport sector to electrify is actually 2- and 3-wheelers, because the economics is already favorable. Whereas for the bigger vehicles, there's still some, it's going to take a few years to get there, at least here in India. So that's certainly something that the government should lay out a roadmap to sort of accelerate that transition, because this is something that's happening anyway, but it will kind of provide assurance to industry that investments in this direction will find a market. And industry also needs to be discouraged from expanding or trying to keep in production its internal combustion engine lines. So that's the kind of thing where some fiscal incentives will, should happen right away, right? But again, as I said, I want to emphasize they should happen right away, but with 10-year framework in mind, right?
Okay.
That we are making.
So you don't mean like a FAME 3 or a FAME 4 kind of scheme. You mean something bigger than that.
Well, there are two ways to, broadly speaking, there are two ways to go about it. One, you can go the quota route where you say, okay, so much percentage of your vehicles should be electric by such and such a year and so on. And the second way that you can do it is you cross-subsidize, right? You tax the market, which is mostly the petrol ones right now, and you cross-subsidize the electric ones. And those cross-subsidies kind of phase out over time as the proportions shift and the electric share grows and the petrol share declines. So, I mean, I think that the price way to go about it, the tax and subsidy way is the preferable way to go about it. But, you could do it the other way also. It's
okay.
Yeah. I do think that the electric cooking thing is really important, and it means really paying attention to our electricity system and making it more reliable, because that's really the key. If you make the electricity system more reliable, and if you make it affordable for, really poor people, then you're going to see a big uptake of electric cooking, a huge decline in air pollution all over the country, much better health for everybody, good outcomes all around. So yeah, I would say that those things. And as for the coal tax, the coal tax should not go down. It should go up, and it should go up at a moderate rate. And the government needs to announce that, look, it's going to keep going up over the next 10 years. We are committed to this transition, and this is going to happen. Then the revenues can be used in various ways, because you're going to have to support people who are gradually displaced, right? You want that displacement to be orderly. You don't want it to be chaotic. And the big danger is that if you try to kick this can down the road and keep the coal plants running for longer, then you will face a crisis when those assets get stranded a few years down the road.